Welcome to a live edition of the Carolina Weather Group. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. It's Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. Coming up in the second half hour, we'll get to tonight's ongoing threat of ice and snow and flash flooding in the Carolinas and what could we see in the days ahead. There's a few storm systems we're keeping an eye on, but we start with this tonight.
Look
Take a
beyond
listen.
the armed guards and through the chain link fence,
Taxes it hard at work.
and you'll see what looks like a simple solution.
I wonder why they're sitting here and not with the family that needs it.
Almost 80 FEMA trailers shipped in from Alabama and Maryland that Aiden Lingerfeld, who works nearby, says haven't budged in months.
They came in, they've been sitting since.
He's far from the only one who shared those words. A WCNC Charlotte viewer emailed me a picture of these trailers and said they've been here since Thanksgiving. She wondered when the federal government was going to deliver them to the people of Western North Carolina. So we came up to Hickory, and during our visit, we ran into a FEMA spokesperson who told us the agency is moving trailers out of here all the time.
So, why are those trailers there and what are they doing? And what is FEMA doing to help the many survivors of Helene all these months later? It's a question that's been getting lots of buzz on the internet. Some true, some not so true. So we brought in the source tonight to find out exactly what's going on. We have WCNC investigative reporter Nate Morabito here with us tonight. We also have on our Carolina Weather Group panel from Columbia, Frank Strait, and with me here in Charlotte, Tom Miner. So Nate, I guess let's talk a little about this story that first aired here on Charlotte television in late January, just a week or so ago. What did you learn about those at the time 80 some odd trailers that are sitting unutilized in Hickory?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I mean, look, when you consider government getting involved with something of the magnitude that occurred with Hurricane Helene, you have to anticipate there are going to be delays. And unfortunately, there have been in regards to these trailers. You have the state working, you've got the federal government working, you have all these charities and community members trying to get help to people who need it. And what seems to have happened here are a couple things. Number one, there is a need for some of these trailers. There's about 70 plus sitting there in Hickory still today, like a staging yard. Some of those trailers are needed in Western North Carolina. You also hear that not everybody who was displaced by the hurricane wants or needs a trailer. And so both can be true at the same time. And I think what a big concern for those in Hickory are, you have all these trailers that are sitting there and it's not a great look. People are
Sure.
wondering, well, what's going on? Why are they just sitting here? And, FEMA will tell you, well, we're moving them out all the time. Trailers are coming and going. But the truth is, not that many have actually been delivered. We talked to the county manager up in Avery County, who said they had 10 households in Avery County that actually needed a trailer from FEMA, and only 2 had received them. So you have 8 that are still waiting to be delivered. What that county manager also told me is that there's nobody living in tents, at the moment as well. And I
Which,
think that's been a big
yeah,
concern. Like, well, there are people who have no place to live. They need these trailers right now. And I think what you're seeing is people who are in hotels or maybe donated trailers, potentially waiting on this long-term help. But to make things even more confusing, the state of North Carolina has created this kind of data dashboard of how many people were displaced, how many people need services, how many people need trailers, and the number never seems to be really clear, right? It's kind of all over the place. And I
yeah,
think that's
these
what
are the numbers that we have tonight from North Carolina. But I think you were actually saying as we came on the air tonight, you also checked the numbers from a slightly different source, and they don't square evenly.
Yeah, I mean, this is why it gets so complicated. And you think about people's mistrust in government. Traditionally, when there's a disaster or any kind of major thing, people want you to prove that you're helping folks, right? So there's not been any FEMA press conference saying, here's a picture of a trailer and here's a family we gave it to, right? And I think there is a bit of an appetite right now for kind of a prove it. Show me that you're giving these trailers to people, right? Especially when you have 71 there in Hickory. And I'll tell you that only about 7 have moved in the couple weeks since we did that story from that site. There were 78 at the time of our reporting. There's 71 there now today. So yes, there are 2,000 people that are housed, but that doesn't mean they're in trailers. Some are in apartments, some are in Airbnbs, FEMA tells us. Some may be at a campground. It's kind of all over the place. And here's the real complicated part about this, too. If you think about Western North Carolina, I worked in Tennessee for a very long time on the other side of the mountain.
You sure did,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, that's a very difficult place to move trailers in and out of, to find flat land, to find hookups to water and sewer. And then you also have to consider people who live in kind of that rural part of the state live there for a reason. They love their property. They don't necessarily want to leave whatever is left. And if they can't get a trailer up to their property, then they have to put it up in like a private park. And then what am I supposed to do? Leave whatever's left of my home and then go stay in a trailer who knows how many miles away. So I'll tell you this. This is what the North Carolina numbers are. The housing need has increased by about 29 requests over the last week. That's what the state of North Carolina says. So yes, there's more than 2 people households in FEMA transitional housing, right? But then there's more than almost 6,000 households, families, people displaced altogether, okay? More than half of those, according to the state of North Carolina, aren't using help of any bit. They haven't requested the help. They're not using the help. And then this is where it really kind of gets like, it's so frustrating because you can't really understand what's going on. In North Carolina, there's only, according to the state, they've only delivered 6 temporary houses to people, and they've got 3 more coming there. Now, that is nothing like the numbers that FEMA is giving us because you have the federal government delivering these as well. And FEMA told me just in the last 24 hours, there's about 135 of these trailers that they've already delivered both to private sites and commercial parks. And then they also have 41 active work orders, and they're trying to get more out there. But that's not that many. And I think, James, you kind of researched this a bit in December too. Like,
Yeah.
we see the trailers. It seems like an easy solution, but traditionally, it's not the most popular form of housing.
Yeah, I remember we were sitting in the newsroom, Nate, and for anybody that doesn't know, during the day, I work at WCNC, as does Nate, and North Carolina General Assembly here in the start of 2025 has put together a select House committee of lawmakers elected from across the state who meet each week to talk about Helene recovery, funding, and get updates. And I remember the day where I went, Nate, they're talking about the trailers. And this was just days after your initial story ran. And it was kind of groundbreaking to hear what the state had to say when a lawmaker, either directly or indirectly after seeing your story, asked them what's with the trailers in Hickory. We can actually
Friday
roll that
when I
sound.
was
Let's
up in
take a listen to
Hickory,
it.
there was still, gosh, I don't know, it looked like 100, 200 campers sitting up there. Why? This is January.
People don't want them.
They don't want them.
I mean, to be as direct and honest with you guys as possible, we've made over 3,000 phone calls, starting with the folks highest in need, and they're open to having a travel trailer if we'll title it in their name and give it to them. But in terms of true temporary housing structure within the confines of what FEMA will allow, most people don't want them, and it's not just our problem. It's FEMA's problem. It's nonprofits' problem. Many of the charities have these travel trailers and these MHUs, modular units that are available to them, and they can't find people that want them and have a need. And so if you are aware of folks that need them, please, we have a hotline set up that will contact those folks immediately, and we can provide that information because we want to make sure people are in a safe situation. The good news of the fact of them not wanting travel trailers is that that's largely driven by the fact that they are in safe, decent housing in some other form or fashion. And so the purpose of the executive order was to give people a choice. And we've worked, and we have eliminated it. We are able to set those trailers much faster than the program that was operating before Christmas.
Nate, I feel like there's a lot to unpack there, especially with the executive order part at the very end. We'll come back to that. What do you think he means, or how did you interpret it when he says people don't want these trailers?
I mean, I think that's a bit of what I interpreted from what FEMA was trying to tell us when we ran into that spokesperson up in Hickory, that there are people who want these trailers, but the vast majority do not. And that's why I kind of pointed out that it can be true that they're taking too long to get these trailers to people who want them, but it can also be true that some people just don't want them. And the latest numbers today on the state's dashboard show 323 people or households are actually looking for housing help right now. I told you that's an increase of the previous week, but if you consider that we're talking about almost 6,000 people displaced, that number from a number perspective
Yeah.
is rather low. But then again, we're talking about people who in many cases lost everything. So anyone who needs this help should be getting it immediately. And here we are now in February, and some people still don't have it. And that is a problem. I think that's really important to point out. No one has said, hey, we're going faster than we want here. No one has said that. I think there's this well kind of discussed point of view from everyone involved that this is going slower than we wanted to.
Yeah, so slow. In fact, they've actually extended the deadline for new applicants at the request of the state government in North Carolina. FEMA has extended this now to March the 8th for new requests, which I interpret it as like people who have not yet asked for assistance who might be wanting assistance. But looking at the dashboard, Nate, zeroing in, I think, on one of the things you were highlighting, there's 2,000 households in FEMA transitional sheltering, according to the state of North Carolina today. 174 of them, give or take, are in mobile housing units. Where are 1,900 of those people if they're not in trailers?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we've heard is they're in hotels. That is where the majority of people are. And if you consider living in a hotel, I mean, I struggled to be in a hotel for a couple days with my family, and you have to consider months upon months of living in a hotel with one bathroom. There's like no real living space. And I think that's the idea here. At what point are we going to give people an actual livable piece of property right now that they can stay in? This is transitional housing, yes. Temporary housing is a bit different because temporary means, a trailer, for example, is insulated for the winter. It's kind of individualized. You can kind of consider it your own. Unlike a hotel, you're neighbors with everyone. And so I think that the idea is this will continue to buy time for these folks to find a placement. But again, a hotel is not good enough. There's got to be some better solutions. And I'll tell you that FEMA did come up with this kind of transitional temporary trailer park in Old Fort to allow a lot of people to live kind of in a park for the time being in their own trailers. But we're just talking about like 150 or less or
Yeah.
fewer trailers here. I mean, we're spending so much time talking about these trailers. The demand does not seem to be there for a vast number of these trailers. And I think that's what the state said. That's what FEMA says. But again, there are some people waiting on them.
Yeah, there was another FEMA briefing in December where I think they tried to explain all of the options they have in their toolkit.
And then
Let's listen to the
lastly, but
soundbite
probably
from
the
December.
most well-known part of FEMA housing is the FEMA units, which are temporary transportable housing units that can be manufactured housing units, or they can also be travel trailer housing units. It is construction and it is contracting, and that is the reason sometimes that most well-known isn't necessarily the fastest, or we all wish it would be faster. We have to prepare lots, find utilities, and work through contracting commercial sites. So we're in 14 different counties right now where we have hauled units, and we have 9 here in Hickory at our staging yard standing by. As those fill up, we will be dispatching others to fill those spots.
Again, that was from December when it sounds like they had 9 in Hickory. You saw dozens when you went up in January. He talked a little bit about utilities and things, and I feel like this would be a good time as any to play a soundbite when President Donald Trump came to visit the region in Asheville. He signed an executive order. Here are some of what he said
Pleased to
about
announce
the
that
housing
under our
situation.
leadership, the federal government will be surging housing solutions to the state that go beyond mere temporary hotel stays that ended up being very short term. The government wouldn't do it any longer, which is ridiculous. We'll marshal all available resources to bring back potable water and make your water and infrastructure dramatically more reliable very quickly. Today, I'll also be signing an executive order slashing all red tape and bureaucratic barriers and permits to ensure the rapid reconstruction of the roads here in western North Carolina. We're going to go through a permitting process that's called no permitting, just get it done. That's the way they built them many years ago, I guarantee you that, right? We will get them back very quickly, and we'll begin the work of fundamentally changing, terminating, or overhauling.
So, Nate, I think this theme's come up a couple times now, the logistics of these trailers. You even heard the representatives from the North Carolina Grow office talk about how the executive order was helping move some of that along. What's your understanding, Nate, of the power or lack thereof of the executive order when it comes to solving some of these logistics?
I mean, it comes down to bureaucracy again. There are rules and regulations in these individual counties. First, you got to find the land. Then you got to make sure there's a sewer and water hookup, and then you got to make sure there's certain requirements to make sure that it's a livable space for these people and it's safe. And I think that's been a real challenge. And I'll point out this is not just on the North Carolina side. I told you I worked in Tennessee for many years, and a lot of the people I know there have told me just over the mountain in Bristol, there's a staging area there, and there's trailers upon trailers that seem to just be sitting there. And I think it all goes back to there's just very few people who are willing to say, I'll take one of these, but it kind of needs to be on my property and it needs to have water and sewer. And I don't blame them at all. I mean, that's what I would want here. But I think what you have is you have the county government, you have the state government, you have the federal government. They're all talking to each other. The government moves slow to begin with.
Mm.
And then you have these permitting requirements that have taken up more time. And in the meantime, as days and weeks go by, my housing needs may change. Maybe I needed a trailer a week ago, but now I found a family member or friends who say, I'm just going to let you stay with me for a little bit. Maybe I was able to get an apartment in the meantime because FEMA has put a few dozen people in apartments as well. So that's kind of the issue too. This changes. What I need today may be different than what I need tomorrow, what I needed yesterday. And I don't know that the government's been able to keep up with that because it seems like they've been behind, a couple steps behind the actual need when it comes to this particular issue.
When you think about the delay and you think about all these players at hand, and you mentioned earlier the rumors that had been circulating about people being left behind in tents, what sort of vacuum have you seen in your investigation when it comes to misinformation seeping in?
It's so tricky because number one, we get the initial tip on this trailer, and they tell me the trailers are never leaving, right? But then I talked to a FEMA person who I actually believe, who seemed in good faith trying to explain to me the situation, who says they are getting moved. People may not see them being moved, but they are. Then I talked to a county manager who I believe in good faith tells me in some ways we're being forgotten and this is unacceptable. So I just think there are so many different players, and it's easy to some degree when you're on the internet here, not down on the ground, to say, here's what's going on. When I talk to public officials, they can be held accountable to telling us the truth, or at least that's what they should be doing. So I think it's really important to hear from them. They are there, they're talking to these people, and there very well may be people in tents, but in the county that I talked to, they said that's not happening. That may have been the case a month ago or 2 months ago. But again, this continuously changes, and it's very hard to really nail down the numbers. And I think that's the biggest problem, really, with all of this, is it's incredibly difficult to get a very simple answer.
Yeah.
How many trailers came off that lot today? How many? Where did they go? Right. So I filed a public records request with the federal government a couple weeks ago, just asking for that. Give me the date of the request, the date of the delivery, what county or zip code it went to. Who knows how long that's going to take? Maybe a year, maybe 2 years. It should be sooner. I would hope they'd be tracking it quickly. I'm not asking for people's personal information, but that is what the public is kind of demanding right now. Prove to us that you are actually doing what you are saying you are doing. And unless we see those trailers move into someone's front yard, it is very hard, I think, for the public to believe that is actually happening.
What type of feedback have you gotten since the story aired, Nate?
I mean, my mom was just telling me the other day, she was out with some of her friends, like a book club or something. They really care about this. They're very much, this matters to them. And from the people, both in the Tennessee, North Carolina side, they want their government held accountable. I think that if anything, this hurricane has separated us even more. And I mean that in a geographic way, because people went, missing for a little while, people lost contact. And so this kind of divide has grown. And there are a lot of people who are just begging for answers. And I think they're glad that we're asking questions. Other news outlets are asking these questions too. They should be simple, quick answers, and we're not getting those.
That brings me to a perfect transition. And as I've mentioned in all bias and transparency, we obviously work together. So I'll lob the promotional question, Nate, of where can people continue to follow your reporting if they want to see where this story takes us?
Yeah, you can look up my Facebook page, Nate Morabito. Also, I'm on X, Nate Morabito, and Instagram, Nate Investigates. That's where I usually do most of my activity, but I'm also on TikTok too, Nate Investigates.
It's always good to see your work, Nate, and I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you didn't mention that you think should be shared with our audience here tonight?
I mean, I would just say,
unless it's just my computer, I think he froze, which is very suspenseful on the phrase.
We want to know what he would just say.
Oh, you're back, Nate. You froze on "I'll just say." It was like the government came for you. So you want to try that again?
I can't repeat it. That's not going to be able to know. I was just saying, like with anything, if you're passionate about this issue or any issue involving your government, you need to reach out to your member of Congress, your congressman, your congresswoman, your senator. It's so critical that the congressional offices hear from people. And you know what? Maybe they can give you the answers that you demand too. I think they should give you those answers. And really, we should be holding them accountable on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Nate. Before we leave this topic, I do want to let people know if you are still interested in receiving help from FEMA, you can get assistance for essential items and housing, like we've been talking about. Scrolling at the bottom of your screen are the eligible counties. You can go to disasterassistance.gov. You can call 1-800-621-3362, or you can use the FEMA app. Again, the deadline to apply has been extended all the way into March. So if you haven't done it yet and now find yourself in need of assistance from FEMA, you can still apply for this help. And you can also go to some of their in-person disaster recovery areas. Again, information scrolling on your screen right now on how you can still apply all these months later for FEMA assistance from the aftermath of Helene. But don't wait much longer. The deadline has now been extended to March. And I guess, Nate, with that deadline extension for new applicants, that also extended the deadline for people currently in housing assistance, did it not?
That's what the county manager told me. Kind of bought them more time to figure out a plan, a long-term plan, kind of kept them housed in the meantime.
Okay. That is good to know. Appreciate your time, Nate, and
great coverage.
Look forward to having you back on again soon.
Yeah, thank you all for what you do too. We really appreciate it. It's critical.
Appreciate that. Means a lot. Thanks so much. In just a moment, we're going to move on over to talk about the ongoing weather that is happening here in the Carolinas tonight. But hopefully, as you've seen through this segment and others, the Carolina Weather Group is committed to keeping our finger on the pulse of Helene recovery. And so we did want to let you know that we got this good piece of news. The 2 lanes of Helene damaged portion of Interstate 40 connecting Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee will reopen soon. Governor Josh Stein, along with Transportation Secretary, was in Western North Carolina this past week to visit this area. So Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy was there. And so it looks like the lanes will reopen by March 1st, at least again, in some capacity to reopen this link that was damaged. You can see the video. You've probably seen it a bunch of times since September of how the river came up and just washed the land, the embankment, and the road away. So come March, they'll get a portion of this interstate back open. We know it's been a big problem for truckers, obviously a big problem for people who work and live in the area. And so it's been a vital need to get this route reopened. So that will hopefully be coming by March. But appreciate Nate's time, and as we've been telling you, we've got lots of other things to get to tonight. So we're going to take a 90-second break, and when we come back, we've got snow, we've got ice, we've got flash flooding occurring in the Carolinas tonight, tomorrow, and a couple things coming down the pike in the days ahead. That's coming up next, right here on the Carolina Weather Group.
Hi, podcast listeners. If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd love to start storm chasing, but I have no idea how to get started. Believe me, you're not alone. You can kick off your chasing adventure with Girls Who Chase on March 1st, 2025 at the Storm Chasing 101 training event we call Spring Training. The annual Spring Training event, and yes, the pun is intended, provides accessible, entry-level, and foundational information and training material for storm chasers at all levels. Spring trainees will range from those who want to begin their chase education or brush up on the basics, to more advanced chasers who want to learn more about in-depth specialized topics. Just like in baseball, we gather every spring to shake off the rust, refresh our skills, and get ready to hit a home run. Spring training is provided in partnership with the leading meteorology education organization, ComEt's MedEd program. This allows for the program to always be held virtually and remain affordable. Girls Who Chase is a global community, and we believe strongly in making science and learning accessible to everyone without the constraints of travel or financial hardship. And if you can't make it on March 1st, don't worry. All presentations will be recorded and made permanently available to registrants. To register and for information on the topics, speakers, and schedule as they become available, visit our website, girlswhochase.com/spring training. That's girlswhochase.com/spring training for more information. We hope to see.
We're so glad the Carolina Weather Group is a proud supporter of the upcoming Girls Who Chase spring training. We had a full interview last week with Jen Walton, the founder and organizer of the event, if you want to go back and learn more. Otherwise, as you heard there, registration is open for their upcoming event, and we know it is going to be fantastic. So, guys, we've got winter weather happening in the Carolinas right now. As we talk, it's been causing power outages, school cancellations, hazardous travel conditions. After a little fake spring and record-breaking high temperatures, Mother Nature certainly wanted to remind us that it was, in fact, winter. As we take a live look right now at the resort cam in Boone.
Oh, look, we got to zoom in on a car.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, Frank, I know you've been keeping a close eye on conditions and the hazards right this minute across the mountains. What are people experiencing?
Well, it looks to me like the winter weather is just about done as temperatures have risen above freezing. Of course, we still have ice on the trees that's in some cases up to a half-inch thick over the mountains and apparently in the foothills too. So it's going to take a while to melt that away, with temperatures only a couple or 3 degrees above freezing in the areas that saw so much ice to this point. So we continue to have some risk for power outages, but at least we're not continuing to add to that ice buildup on the trees and power lines.
Yeah, we know this was particularly hard hit in Avery County, in Burke County. Not that it was exclusive to them by any means, but we know that's where the ice storm warning had been issued by the National Weather Service. At this hour, we have just a few lingering winter storm warnings up because of flurries, accumulations on the roadways, bitter cold, but also, again, the fact that we did have previously ice falling in those areas. And now they're starting to be replaced with flood watches. And we'll talk about that threat in just a second. But what I'm trying to get up on the screen right now is we continue to stream live to you on YouTube and on Facebook. And I should say, we've been streaming live weather conditions on our Carolina Weather Net, real-time warnings, live sky cams, all the information you might need to know, even when our weekly show is not on the air. What I wanted to show is some of those ice accumulations, as Frank just mentioned, because they've been pretty impressive. Frank, some of these numbers really kind of popping out as we look to see quarter to half an inch. I mean, that's a lot of freezing rain.
Yeah, it is. And a quarter inch is usually where we start to see some trouble with the trees and power lines coming down. So when you have that quarter inch and the buildup goes up to a half inch, you start seeing that become fairly widespread. So glad that temperatures are rising and there are most places above freezing. That we're not going to add to it anymore because I'm sure the power outages are starting to get fairly widespread in those areas.
We know it's difficult because a lot of people use electric heat, so I hope folks have an alternative source as our map refreshes with the latest real-time information. Clicking on, again, just a small handful of some of these. Minneapolis, North Carolina, a quarter inch of ice there near Upper Roaring Creek Valley. Boone coming in with a quarter inch. About 4/10 of an inch in Fleetwood. Glendale Springs, a half an inch. Numerous tree limbs snapping throughout the region due to the weight of the ice. And that's certainly the threat, is that ice builds up on the tree branches, it builds up on the power lines, it makes it really heavy, and then stuff starts to fall on down. This map from poweroutages.us, Frank, is still showing some of those impacts, but I think it's improved since earlier on this Wednesday.
Yeah, I think so. Allegheny County is showing about a fourth of the customers in the county out. Ashe County doing a little bit better, still 3,100 people without power, but that's has a percentage lower. Watauga County also about 3,100. That's somewhere a little less than 10%. Mitchell County also seeing a fairly high percentage, but not a lot of customers there. It's under 1,000 people out. And Wilkes County, that looks like it's about 2 or 3%, but 1,200 customers without power there.
So we know that folks have been dealing with winter weather, and as we mentioned, Frank, the attention is now going to be turning on over to a flood threat. As we pop back up on the screen on this Wednesday, you can see where we currently have over Tennessee flood watches, flood advisories, even some flash flood warnings as you make your way all the way back over to Alabama. And, we can kind of anticipate that the flood threat will continue. I know I got an inch of rain here in Charlotte. I imagine it's somewhat similar to Tom. Tom, let me actually pause and ask you this. You're pretty close to a creek. The creeks look pretty high here in Mecklenburg County. What have been your observations?
Yeah, we've had some elevated levels here with the creek rolling through. I will say they came through not too long ago. It actually cleared some of the debris and the trees and the limbs, so that actually kind of helps keep things moving. But it's been a little while since we've seen the creek rise here. I'm along the 4 Mile Creek area, but definitely going to keep an eye on this over the next couple of days also.
Here's the latest HRRR computer model, the high rapid refresh model. And you can see as we go from now through the remainder of tonight, you can see periods of heavy rain return to western North Carolina, then into the upstate. Even at times, could be heavy at times. Maybe some thunderstorm embedded in here, Frank. Isn't that possible?
Yeah, I think so. I think we will see some embedded thunderstorms. That being the leftovers from the severe weather event that's going on back in Mississippi and Alabama right now. Just to show the current radar, there it is on my screen share. There's actually a tornado watch out for parts of Mississippi and Alabama tonight, and there have been a few tornadoes reported out there. That activity, while it's not going to be causing any tornadoes here in the Carolinas, it is going to be shifting east, and that's going to be responsible for the heavy rain that we'll see over upstate South Carolina, western North Carolina tonight. That looks like it's mostly going to be in the 2 to 3 inch range, some locally higher amounts, perhaps 4 inches. Farther east, the rains are going to be lesser, and there will be thunderstorms embedded, I think. I don't think we're looking at any severe weather. The Storm Prediction Center does not have us even in a marginal risk, any part of the Carolinas at this point for Thursday. However, there could be some locally gusty winds, perhaps gusting to 35 or 40 miles an hour along the coastal plain, and perhaps a little farther to the north and west as well, as that line of thunderstorms comes through overnight tonight and through the first part of tomorrow.
Yeah, I've got the Storm Prediction Center outlook up here, and I could put it up on the screen. As you said, general risk of thunderstorms, more enhanced risk as, again, you make your way back towards Alabama or Mississippi on this Wednesday night. As we look ahead to Thursday, that general risk of thunderstorms continues with us as we head past that morning rush hour. And then as we make our way to Friday, that system will move on out. But if I can find the graphic here, Frank, I thought this was real good because, here is the flash flood risk that you can see for Thursday, and it shows that slight risk of at least 15% chance of seeing flash flooding in, of all places, western North Carolina. And certainly, as we talked about in the first half of the show, that's a hard hit area, and a lot of people still dealing with the recovery from Helene. Frank, what are some of the special impacts that people might have to look for in this post-storm aftermath?
Well, thankfully, for better or for worse, it's been dry across the Carolinas for a while. So the streams are going to be able to handle the rain that falls to a certain extent, but it's going to be a little bit too much too fast. And there's also the wild card factor that's been thrown out by Helene, and that it's sort of changed the stream beds a little bit, or a lot in some cases. So it's going to be, at least for the first next several months, still a little bit difficult to predict how heavy rain will impact those streams that were changed a little by Helene. So we're not 100% sure how this is going to affect it. I mean, we know it's not going to be a huge flash flooding event with where you get 6 or 8 inches of rain. Now we're looking at 2 to 3, maybe 4 inches of rain here, and not all coming in the space of an hour like you would see with thunderstorms, but spread out over several hours. So we're going to see the rises on some of these streams, and there's going to be some minor isolated flooding to deal with, at least. But again, there's the little bit of concern as to how the amount of rain that we're going to see will impact these rivers and smaller streams that have been changed by Helene.
National Weather Service in Greenville, Spartanburg, which covers a lot of this area, put out an emergency briefing earlier, as they do routinely to emergency officials and others in the area. But this sentence really jumped out to me, and I wanted to share it with everyone tonight because I thought it was so true. We recognize that the geomorphology, there's your next Scrabble word, has changed, and there is still debris in the waterways from Helene. These changes may affect the levels at which nuance to minor flooding occurs, because I feel like in our vocabulary, when we're talking about a flood threat, we often say, if you live in a low-lying area that is prone to flooding, this is the type of event where you might see some flooding. And I think what they're trying to say here is, even if you live in a low-lying area that doesn't typically flood, if there are things, as Tom mentioned, in the waterways that could change the way water flows, you might get flooding this time where you haven't before. And I thought that was really interesting. Of course, besides the SAT word. I definitely didn't have to Google geomorphology.
Yeah, I wish you would have brought that up first so that I could say that the GSP has found a word, geomorphology, that explains in one word the thing that took me a paragraph to explain.
Yes, there's apparently one word for it. Watching live on YouTube tonight, Carolina air shots. Lots of new runoffs between caves are out. Also, yes, the water
Yeah.
has all new ways to flow. We've seen it. Probably one of the more popular or infamous examples is the way that the water got rerouted in Chimney Rock after Helene, and the way that the Broad River there flows now is different than the way it flowed before Helene. And
Mm.
Chimney Rock, being a very popular tourist area, we know has been pretty focal point in a lot of this recovery, and there are a lot of other nuanced areas that are also in this scenario where they will have to watch for things like new nuanced flooding or even the potential, I guess, of some mudslides. Hopefully not. That's certainly something we wouldn't want to see. But, when we went to Chimney Rock in December, we met up with the Army Corps of Engineer who were trying to get debris out of the water. And they've had the chance recently, guys, to expand to other areas of debris cleanup. But this was video just from last week of them cleaning up the Swananoa River in the Asheville area, Buncombe County, and they were still removing, of all things, a whole cab from a tractor trailer, right? So these are the
Wow.
type of things that, in addition to rocks and dirt, can change the way the waters flow. Yeah. So Frank, will expect maybe a little rumble of thunder here or there. Like you said, nothing severe as
Right.
we head on through the rest of the night, thankfully, at least nothing in the terms of tornadoes. I guess the biggest severe threat would be if you live in one of those areas where you could see the 5 to 15% chance of flash flooding. That is certainly a valid type of severe weather. Don't want to diminish that. So if you are going to bed tonight, make sure you have a way to be woken up in the middle of the night by a NOAA weather radio, or any way you get those vital warnings that can only and do only come from the National Weather Service. You'll want to be able to be alerted if any of this flash flooding were to come to fruition. Here is that outlook once again tonight, that slight risk, which does extend Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and into portions of South Carolina and North Carolina. What type of analysis do you have on the screen here, Frank?
Well, I have called this up kind of to explain why we're not going to see much in the way of severe thunderstorm activity. It's because of the wedge, which shows up
Yep.
pretty well here. The cold air damming situation east of the mountains, where the cold air is really entrenched over the central North Carolina into western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, even down here to Columbia. It's 42 here in Columbia right now. Even to Georgia. It's we have that wedge in place, and that represents a layer of chilly and very stable air near the surface. So you can't get severe thunderstorms to happen very easily in a situation like that. Sometimes, every now and then, you can have it really unstable above that stable layer near the surface, and you can maybe work some strong winds down to the surface, but more likely some larger hail gets to the surface, and that's about all you can do in the wedge situation. But as we go through the night and early tomorrow, the wedge is going to erode some, and it'll get a little more unstable along especially the South Carolina coast, and that'll allow some of those stronger winds to try to mix down. However, but by the time we get to that point, it's late at night, first thing in the morning, and you don't have a lot of instability to work with during that part of the day. So there's really not any significant severe storm threat.
That is the one. This will be the only time in my life I ever say thank goodness for the wedge.
Right.
Do not like that
Now,
wedge.
however, we do have a concern for Sunday when the next storm system comes through. Looks like we're going to get a nice day Friday. Looks like Saturday is going to be a decent day too. But then, well, actually, a warm front comes through and maybe causes a couple showers on Saturday. But then Saturday night into Sunday, another cold front's going to come through. And this time, we're not really going to have much of a wedge in place as this cold front comes through, and there's going to be thunderstorms with that. That's what's on my screen share, showing the everyone's favorite model, the Euro.
There
and
it is.
you can see that line of thunderstorms there with that front, and also some of those discrete cells occurring over parts of North Carolina and the PD region of South Carolina. Well, that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. That could be that could be interesting if that comes to pass. But the main area of concern is going to be with the cold front approaching, that line of storms that comes through. Looks like the first part of the day again, that's 7 a.m., that's 10 a.m., and that's 1 p.m., and then after that, it's quickly out to sea. So that's when the storms come through again during the least unstable part of the day, and it is still February. So it's hard to get much instability going this time of year anyway. But we aren't going to have the wedge in place, and so there will be some instability, and there's going to be a lot of wind aloft with this cold front as it's pushing through. And when you have thunderstorms in that type of environment, they do what we call momentum transport, which takes the momentum of the stronger winds aloft and carries them down to the surface with this thunderstorm downdraft. So there's going to be a greater risk of severe weather coming up with this frontal passage late Saturday night and Sunday morning.
We will be sure to keep an eye on that. One of the many things that feels like it is in the cards here as we look at this ongoing weather that is just cycling through ice and snow. And Frank, you said it a second ago, Mother Nature reminding us the time of year that it is, in fact, February, because I'm sure you guys have seen this.
Yes.
This is another branch of NOAA, lots of different branches of NOAA, but those charged with the look at the chances of heavy snow have this nice circle that extends from New York City through the nation's capital and through North Carolina and the smidgen of South Carolina for February the 20th. I don't know if I'm ready to lock in something that's 8 days away, but got my attention.
I'll tell you what, Apple Weather is. They're already saying
God.
3 to 4 inches of snow. I just checked the app. They're locked in.
They're locked in. Well, hang on. Let me see if I can find it. Tim Buckley, chief meteorologist at WFNY in Greensboro, had a tweet just about this yesterday that I have to find again, because Tom, I know when you were on last, you were telling us about the epic fails of Apple Weather's forecasting. But not only can it not forecast, and not only does it not know what has happened in the past, it also doesn't know what's happening now, because this is a picture from yesterday where it says it was snowing and it was 34 degrees. And as Tim says, it wasn't 34 degrees and it wasn't snowing.
Look at that.
So it doesn't know the past, the future, or the present.
Clearly.
Right. Well, it is, it is what it is.
I'm gonna get that on a T-shirt.
It's a crap app. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, once we get that cold front through the area that's going to pass through late Saturday night, Sunday morning, we are going back to winter for a while. It looks like we'll be in winter time for a couple of weeks again. And the cold air is plentiful. I mean, right now it's 15, 20 below up in North Dakota right now. And a lot of Canada is extremely cold too. So, there's an ample supply of cold air up there that's going to work its way more into the United States again once we get to Sunday. And it's a legit concern around the 20th that another storm will come through. Yeah. If you want to look back at my screen share again, we'll take another look at the Euro and see what it's saying. And let's see, that's the evening of Thursday the 19th. And it has some cold air in place, a little bit of snow falling over North Carolina, too warm for anything but rain in South Carolina. And there it's got some snow and ice in North Carolina going over to a heavy snow event as it moves out. That's one model's opinion of it. GFS has a different idea. The Canadian model, which was the first to catch on to the storm idea back in January, but also was ridiculous with its solution, going crazy with a historic snowstorm down here in South Carolina, and that didn't work out. At one point it said I was going to get 20 inches of snow in my backyard. I ended up about an inch and a quarter.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because this feels like a good transition if there is such a one. Speaking of times it used to really snow, on this date in weather history, February 12th, 2014, we saw up to 20 inches, nearly 2 feet of snow in portions of the Carolinas. And I mean, I'm looking at this going 7 to 8 inches in Mecklenburg County. I don't think I've ever seen 7 to 8. I moved here like right after this. So I don't think I've ever seen 7 to 8
Oh.
inches in Mecklenburg
So
County.
you weren't around for the 2004 storm then, were you?
I was not around for the 2004 storm.
No,
Neither was I. I
18 to
was
20
around for
inches
the
in Rock Hill with that one.
2014. This one I do remember, and this was I remember the schools were closed for at least 4 days with this system. This was a really, really good one. This, I would say, is probably the last time that we had really, really good snow here in Mecklenburg. Like that.
Yeah, and that was a big storm in South Carolina too. There was up to a foot of snow in the upstate. There was a
coming right now.
dreadful ice storm in the Midlands of South Carolina and Central Savannah River area. There you found the
DNR report.
Yeah. Well, this is actually SCEMD that made that map, but yeah, there was over an inch of ice.
That's a lot.
In
That's a lot of
parts
ice.
of the Central Savannah River area there in Aiken County, and Bamberg County, and Barnwell County. That took down a lot of trees and power lines. I mean, it was a big deal. It was something like $300 million worth of damage to just in timber damage in South Carolina from that storm.
And here are the snow totals.
There's the snow totals.
15 inches in Greenville.
In the upstate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it looks like Landrum.
Yeah, that's probably higher elevations. But I mean,
Landrum isn't all that high up.
Well, I mean, I guess Anderson.
Wait a minute. No, that's in Greenville County. So that wouldn't be Landrum. That's probably Caesar's Head then.
Okay.
So yeah, it would be a high elevation spot there. Caesar's Head's over 3,000.
But Columbia 2 inches, Kershaw 4. I'm realizing I should call some of these numbers out for our beloved audio podcast listeners who can't otherwise see the lovely maps on the screen. So let me just go back to North Carolina, if you guys will indulge me for just a second, because I feel like I should read more numbers. We had 20 inches just shy of Fancy Gap in Virginia there as you made your way over towards, like, say, Mount Airy there along the I-77 corridor. That extended as much as 12 inches down to Lake Norman. Could you guys imagine 12 feet? Oh, my God. 9 to 10 inches across western North Carolina. Greensboro, call it up to 10. Triangle, call it somewhere between, I don't know, what am I looking at here, guys? 3 to 5. And we got a trace all the way to the I-95 corridor.
An amazing snowstorm. Amazing.
What did you do, Tom? Give me a Tom 2014 snow memory.
It was, the whole neighborhood was out. We were sledding. We were building snowmen. I was still in school at the time. It was closed for several days. So, of course, we were thrilled about that. We were living it up and having the best time.
I can remember a snowstorm in college at the University of Georgia. I forget which year, but we were closed for nearly the whole week. And if I had only brought my sleds back with me when I had driven back to start the semester from New York, I could have made bank. Like
always keep a sled handy.
I have 3 in my garage now, Tom. So remember that next Thursday.
Okay? Yes, I'm coming over.
Come on over.
I have no sled, but I do have a snow shovel. I ordered one off of Amazon.
There you go.
Before the last storm, and it arrived the night before. I'm like, yes, I got a snow shovel.
Yes.
I'm probably not going to need it, but I've got it.
You jinxed it, is what happened.
Yeah.
I got one other thing to mention before we go tonight, and it's not directly correlated to weather, but you guys know I love trains. I think a lot of you at home love trains, which is why I'm going to devote a few seconds to talking about this little nugget I got to write up today for WCNC.com, which I think at least some of you, a good number of you, will come to appreciate. Amtrak Piedmont service, state funded here between Charlotte and Raleigh with 4 daily trips a day. They currently only have onboard vending machines, free drip coffee, free water bottles. But coming next year in 2016, thanks in part to a $14 million grant from the Federal Railroad Administration, we will be getting cafe cars.
Okay.
Where you can get a to be determined menu. But if you look at what cafe cars in other parts of the country offer, it'd be like hot dogs and hamburgers and chips and soda. Not New York strip steak. That's a dining car. We're not getting one of those, but we're getting like a lunch counter. And so we'll get that at some point in 2026, either using refurbished cars from the fleet. Maybe they'll lease a couple cars, but they are doing that because sometime in the early 2030s, we will get the long-awaited all-new passenger cars for the Piedmont service. The ones they're running now, they're clean, they're nice, but they date back to the 1950s and 60s. So we will get brand spanking new ones sometime in the early 2030s, fingers crossed.
James is excited and ready.
James gets very excited when he gets the right train stories.
I love it. This is so cool, by the way. I mean, this will be a huge win for train enthusiasts and also foodies too.
Yeah. Now you can just go ride the train and eat some food if you want.
Perfect day.
There you go. That sounds like a perfect day to me. Tom, Frank, anything else for this week's edition of our show?
Can't think of anything else. Just to get ready for another spell of winter time. The 81 degrees that we had back in Columbia a couple times actually was nice. Actually, GSP got to 81 as well, and that tied their February record.
We broke a lot of records.
Yeah,
we did that show last week,
highs.
Frank, with you and with Corey Davis from North Carolina Climate Office, talking about climate change, the warming climate, record-breaking temperatures, and then suddenly we hit 80 degrees here in Charlotte twice and set new records, and it was timed well, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But that's going away after Sunday. We're going to go back to winter for a couple weeks, and then it looks like after that we might see spring get sprung around the 5th of March. We'll see. We'll see. But looks like we're going to. This part of the country will warm up. Not sure that's going to be true for other parts of the country. In Northeast, Midwest, Northern Plains, they may stay cold through March, but the signs are that we're going to warm up, and anybody that called for 6 weeks of winter, or
anyone
going to be a little off on that one.
Any creature?
Do we have any creatures in this part of the country call for 6 more weeks of winter? We know the groundhog up north is always wrong. So,
do you have a feud? I know you lived in Pennsylvania for a long time. Is there a feud between
Possibly.
State College and
no
Punxsutawney-Phil?
No. There was a friendly relationship there.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. I just personally didn't care for it.
It's just for fun, right? It's just for fun,
right?
As we mentioned earlier in the show, we're here each and every Wednesday night. We'll have updates as we did on Tuesday night when weather is a thing that you need to know about. But we also have streaming for you on YouTube from your phone to your smart TV or Carolina Weather Net, rotating cameras, live warnings, live sky cameras. And so on this Wednesday night, if you're watching live with us on YouTube right now, we're actually about to take you back over to watch that loop. If you're listening to the audio podcast feed or you're watching elsewhere, please do like and subscribe on our YouTube. We are able to offer some additional services there. And so if you haven't checked them out before, we hope you will do that. But we do appreciate wherever it is you're watching or listening to this week's show from. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. Thanks to our guest, Nate Morabito from WCNC Charlotte, and our panel, Frank Strait in Columbia, Tom Miner here in Charlotte, who with any luck will be sleigh riding with me next week. Maybe. Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Yes.
But until then, everyone, be well. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Bye, y'all.